Hi everyone, and welcome to our channel. Today, we're bringing you an emotional and powerful story about love, betrayal, and a mother's journey to uncover the truth. If you enjoy deep, meaningful stories that touch the heart, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Now, sit back, relax, and let the story begin. Autumn in Seattle always carried a quiet melancholy. A light drizzle misted the city all day. The sky hung gray and heavy, and the wind rustled the sidewalks lined with yellowing leaves. Rachel Bennett stepped out of the glass office tower where she worked, draped in a beige trench coat, her hair neatly tied, her expression exhausted. She had just left a 3-hour design meeting packed with tension and disagreements. Instead of calling for a car as usual, Rachel decided to walk. She needed the air, the silence, the space to breathe. She found herself wandering into the quieter side of Fremont, where old buildings still stood proudly. There, she stopped in front of a small cafe with a wooden sign, Warm and Willow. It wasn't one of her usual high-end places, but it looked warm, with golden lighting and the soft scent of baked goods wafting out the door. She pushed the door open. A soft chime sounded. Inside was a rustic space with wooden tables, exposed brick walls, and old bookshelves. A faint jazz tune played from hidden speakers. Rachel chose a window seat, brushing her fingers over the well-worn menu. Hi there. Today's special is our ginger cake. Pairs beautifully with a cappuccino. A clear, gentle voice spoke beside her. Rachel looked up and froze. Standing before her was a girl, maybe 18, 19 years old, wearing a black apron. Her hair was slightly curled, her eyes a warm brown, her nose straight, her smile gentle. That face. Rachel's face, 20 years ago. She caught herself staring and quickly pulled her expression into something more composed. I'll have that. Moments later, a warm cappuccino and a freshly baked cake were placed in front of her. Rachel took a bite. The warm ginger spice mixed perfectly with the sweetness. But less than 20 seconds later, her throat began to close. A burning sensation rose in her chest. Her vision blurred. Her heartbeat spiked. Her fingers clutched at the table. No, it can't be. Her chair scraped back. She staggered. And then someone rushed toward her. It was the girl, the server. You're having a reaction, aren't you? Without waiting for confirmation, the girl reached in her apron and pulled out an EpiPen, injecting it precisely into Rachel's thigh before easing her back into the chair. Breathe slowly. Don't panic. I've been through this too. The honey glaze contains an enzyme that can trigger reactions. You're going to be okay. Rachel gasped, sweat forming on her neck and forehead. Slowly, the panic eased. Her pulse began to calm. She turned and looked at the girl, and confusion warring in her eyes. What's your name? She asked hoarsely. Ava. Ava Reed. I'm a sophomore at the University of Washington. Major in literature. I work here in the afternoons. Rachel didn't reply. She just nodded, her heart pounding with something she couldn't name. After she had recovered, Rachel refused the ambulance. She said she'd be fine, just needed a moment. Ava handed her a warm glass of water and returned to the counter. But Rachel couldn't take her eyes off the girl, Ava. Her posture, the way the light hit her cheekbones, even the tone in her voice. It was like looking into a mirror of the past. But what truly unnerved her wasn't the resemblance. It was the honey allergy. It was a rare, inherited allergy in her family. Rachel's mother had always said, no one in the Bennett line touches honey. Rachel had nearly died at 7 after eating a honey cookie. Now this girl, this stranger, not only looked like her, but shared the exact same rare condition. Leaving the cafe, Rachel walked slowly toward her car. Rain had begun to fall. She glanced up at the dull gray sky, the drizzle wetting her face. 18 years ago, after a car accident, Rachel had gone into early labor at 35 weeks. She remembered waking up in the hospital, in pain, confused, and hearing a young doctor say, "Congratulations, you delivered a healthy baby boy." She had been stunned. Every ultrasound had said it was a girl, but she had been too weak to argue, too overwhelmed. And then she brought home the baby boy, Ethan, and raised him with every ounce of love she had, even though there had always been a quiet space between them she could never cross. That night, Rachel didn't sleep. She opened a dusty box from her closet, one filled with memories. There was an ultrasound image, a tiny hand barely formed waving. On the back, in her handwriting, Daisy Bennett, week 28. Tears welled in her eyes. The next morning, Rachel made a quiet call to a trusted DNA lab she had once worked with during a complicated inheritance case. But this time, it wasn't for a client. This time, it was for her own broken, trembling heart. Rachel Bennett's penthouse apartment on the 25th floor overlooked Elliott Bay, a place where the water gleamed silver in the early morning and sparkled with ship lights by night. It had once been what she and Eric called their perfect home. But lately, despite the wine in the cabinets and family photos hanging neatly on the walls, the apartment felt unbearably cold. Ethan Bennett, their only son, was in his soundproofed mini studio, a space he had built at 16. The faint strumming of an electric guitar leaked through the door. Rachel stood outside, holding a cup of chamomile tea, hesitating to knock. It had been a long time since she truly felt like a mother in her own home. Ethan was bright, talented, calm, recently accepted into the University of Washington to study music. But between him and Rachel, there had always been a strange, unnamed distance. He was polite, obedient, respectful, but never open. No late-night chats, no spontaneous hugs, no warm mom like when he was younger. Since he turned 13, a quiet wall had grown between them. Rachel had tried everything, but never found a way to reach across it. She knocked gently. "Ethan, I made tea. Want some?" No answer. A few seconds later, the door opened, and Ethan peeked out, removing his headphones. "Thanks, Mom. You could just leave it on the desk." Rachel nodded and stepped inside, placing the cup next to his laptop. In the warm lamplight, her eyes caught a detail that made her heart sink. A photo in a glass frame of Ethan and Eric laughing together on a fishing trip years ago. She wasn't in it. "What are you working on today?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "A jazz remix. I'm layering in some violin," Ethan replied, not meeting her gaze. Rachel stood there a moment longer, then turned to leave. As she reached the door, her eyes fell on the teacup. Cream ceramic, still warm, still bearing Ethan's fingerprints. A thought struck her. Her heart began to race. She picked up the cup and carefully sealed it inside a plastic bag. The next day, Rachel drove to a DNA lab in Belltown, the same one she had once worked with during a client's estate dispute. Inside, the space was sterile and quiet, smelling faintly of disinfectant. She met with Dana, a lab technician she knew and trusted. "I need to run a maternity DNA test between myself and a sample for my son," Rachel said. Dana was surprised, but asked no questions. She handed Rachel the consent forms, then accepted the teacup. "Results in 5 business days. Do you want them mailed or in person?" "In person," Rachel replied firmly. The next 5 days were hell. Rachel tried to focus on work, but failed. Every project became a blur. She woke up nightly in cold sweat, her mind replaying the image of Ethan, the boy she had held through fevers and school nights, and a whisper of a single fear. "He's not mine." On Friday morning, her phone buzzed. "DNA results are ready for pickup." Rachel left the office early, saying nothing. Rain fell in light sheets as she parked outside the lab. She sat in the car for 10 minutes before going in. Dana handed her a sealed envelope. Rachel didn't open it there. She walked quickly back to her car, locked the doors, and with trembling hands, tore the seal. Her eyes scanned quickly until they hit the bolded final line. No maternal relationship detected between Rachel Bennett and the tested sample. Silence. The world stopped moving. Sound vanished. Her chest tightened like she was falling into an endless void. Ethan, the boy she had fed, bathed, comforted through nightmares, was not her biological son. The envelope slipped from her fingers. Her hands gripped her head as if trying to hold herself together. A broken sob caught her throat, but she didn't cry. She just shook. Then a face flashed in her mind, Ava's. Her eyes, her skin, and a honey allergy. This wasn't coincidence anymore. Rachel reached for her phone, hands still trembling. She searched through her archived medical records from 18 years ago. She scrolled, scanned, reread, and there it was. The time of Ethan's birth and the time she woke up post-delivery didn't match. There was a gap of an hour, enough for anything to have happened. The suspicion was no longer a whisper. It was screaming the truth. Her child had been switched. That night, Rachel didn't go home. She sat alone in her car near the waterfront, rain tapping gently on the windshield. The DNA result lay crumpled beside her. Ethan wasn't her son, and Ava could be the little girl she had once carried inside her, the daughter she named Daisy before even giving birth, the child she believed she had never met. But she couldn't act on impulse. Not now. She needed proof. Rachel leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. She knew what she had to do tomorrow. She would return to Warm and Willow. And this time, she would collect a DNA sample from Ava for the test that might rewrite everything. That morning, Seattle lay under a veil of mist. A thin rain hung over the streets, casting a gray, shivering hush across the city. Rachel didn't go to the office. Instead, she drove straight to the DNA testing center, a place that had become all too familiar to her in recent days. On the passenger seat sat a fabric bag containing Eric's golf sweater, the one he wore every weekend. She had quietly taken it from the laundry basket, sealing it carefully to retrieve DNA from the collar. She hadn't told anyone. She couldn't. Part of her still hoped. Ethan might not be her son, but he could still be Eric's. And if that were true, it would confirm everything she feared, that her baby had been switched. Inside the clinic, she nodded at Dana, who had come to recognize the grief behind Rachel's quiet eyes. Rachel handed over the sample, signed the consent form, and requested a paternity test between Eric Bennett and the sample of Ethan, which the lab had already archived. How long until the results? Rachel asked. 3 to 5 business days. You want to pick them up in person again? Yes, as soon as possible. Back at home, Rachel walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge to grab water. Her hands were trembling. Thoughts stormed through her mind. If Ethan is Eric's son with another woman, who is the mother? Could it be Claire, the woman who vanished without a trace? And what if it's not Eric's child at all? Then where did this boy come from? Her heart twisted with a mix of dread, anger, and fragile hope. She glanced up at the family photo on the wall. Ethan, Eric, and herself smiling during a camping trip at Crescent Lake. Sunlight, pine trees, laughter. But now, it all felt like a stranger's memory. On the 4th day, her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Your DNA results are ready for pickup. Rachel returned to the lab, heart pounding. Dana gave her the sealed envelope, holding it a moment longer than usual, as if she understood this one was different. Rachel didn't open it there. She walked to a quiet cafe, found a corner table, and slowly peeled open the envelope with cold fingers. Her eyes landed on the conclusion. A biological father-child relationship exists between Eric Bennett and the tested sample. A chill rushed down Rachel's spine. Ethan is Eric's biological son, but not hers. There could only be one explanation. The baby she gave birth to had been switched. Ethan was the child of Eric and another woman. Rachel's chest tightened. Memories of that fateful day 18 years ago came flooding back. The car crash, the blood, the harsh light in the operating room, the doctor's voice saying, a healthy baby boy. But she remembered clearly. Every ultrasound had shown it was a girl. She bought a pink knitted blanket. Then just a few hours after waking from unconsciousness, she had been handed a baby boy and told he was hers. Now it was all painfully clear. She had raised someone else's child, the child of her husband and his mistress, and her biological daughter was out there somewhere. The question burned in her mind. That night, she combed through Eric's old files, archived emails, messages she had once ignored out of trust. And there, buried deep, she found a name, Claire Monroe, a former assistant at Eric's firm. Young, bright. There had been rumors. Too many work trips. Too many shared glances in old photos from before Rachel gave birth. Claire had left the company suddenly. And months later, she had disappeared from every social platform. No one mentioned her again. Rachel's heart clenched. She knew that if she wanted to find her real daughter, she had to start with that name, Claire. And as if fate were aligning every piece, the image of Ava, the barista at Warm and Willow, with the same face, the same skin, and the same rare honey allergy, returned to her mind. There was no more doubt. Rachel needed final confirmation. The next morning, she went back to the cafe. Ava was working the counter, cheerful and kind. Rachel kept her expression neutral, but inside, her mind was racing. When Ava brought her coffee, Rachel smiled. "Thanks. Smells wonderful." Ava nodded and stepped away. Rachel waited for her to leave the table, then gently took the paper napkin Ava had just used to dry her hands, folded it carefully, and sealed it inside a zip bag. This time, she would run a DNA test between herself and Ava, and if the result matched what her heart already knew, she would finally confront the full truth. Seattle remained damp and chilly as always, but Rachel's heart was burning with anticipation and a desperate need for truth. She hadn't slept a full night in days. At this point, she couldn't even distinguish between anxiety and hope. Her mother's instinct told her Ava was her daughter, but instinct wasn't proof. Science was. She needed Ava's DNA. But how to get it? Without scaring her, without arousing suspicion? Rachel knew that if she misstepped, she might lose her only chance to stay close to Ava naturally, without breaking the fragile thread of connection they were forming. That day, Rachel arrived at Warm and Willow earlier than usual. She chose a small table near the barista counter, close enough to watch Ava, but not obviously so. About 15 minutes later, Ava entered the cafe, still yawning. Her dark curls were tied up high, her hoodie a soft gray, her face makeup-free yet strikingly beautiful. Rachel felt a sudden tightness in her chest. It was like watching herself as a college student, vibrant, bright, and quietly lonely. When Rachel placed her order, Ava brought her coffee herself. This time, she stayed for a moment longer, more relaxed than usual. "You come here a lot," Ava said, smiling. "I'm guessing you're an architect or something?" Rachel chuckled. "What makes you say that?" "The way you dress, the way you look at the details in this place. And you're always writing in your notebook while drinking coffee." "Just a guess." Rachel smiled gently, warmed by the familiarity. "You guessed right. I'm an architect." Ava rested her chin on her hand. "Sounds cool. I study literature, but I suck at drawing." They chatted for a few more minutes. Rachel noticed something. Ava had a habit of tucking her hair behind her ear as she spoke. A few strands fell onto her hoodie, clinging lightly to the fabric. Rachel's breath caught. This might be her chance. She pretended to drop her spoon and bent down to pick it up. As her eyes scanned the floor, there it was, a long, dark hair curled gently near the table leg. When Ava turned to head back to the counter, Rachel quickly stooped, picked it up with a tissue, and slipped it into her coat pocket. That evening, Rachel sat in her home office, now transformed into a kind of mini investigation center, with documents, hospital records, and sealed envelopes neatly organized. She pulled out the plastic bag, opened it gently, and using tweezers, transferred the hair strand into a sterile sample tube. Then she sealed the box, included the form with her name, and next to the comparison field, she wrote, "Ava Reed." No explanation, no questions, just a sample. The next morning, she returned to the DNA lab. Dana gave her a brief nod, understanding that this might be the most important test of all. "Results will be ready in 5 business days. We'll notify you when it's available," Dana said. Rachel nodded and left, her heart suspended between fear and hope. 5 days. In 5 days, she would know. Was Ava truly her biological daughter? In those 5 days, Rachel continued to visit the cafe regularly, never pressing Ava, never saying too much. Their conversations remained light. Books, dreams, college stress. Rachel absorbed every word, as though she were collecting pieces of a lost lifetime. One afternoon, Ava mentioned, "I don't know who my birth parents are. I stayed in a foster home before I was adopted. I don't hold it against them, but sometimes I wonder, did my mom ever think about me?" Rachel's throat tightened. She had thought of her. She had cried for her. She had carried a dream for 18 years, that somewhere her daughter was alive, breathing, waiting to be called my child. And now, as the truth neared, Rachel could only wait. With trembling hope and silent tears, the 5th day passed slower than a lifetime. That morning, Seattle was cloaked in its familiar misty rain. But for Rachel, everything felt different. Every passing car outside her office window, every keyboard clack, every colleague's coffee order, all faded into the background under the weight of one thing: waiting. Where her phone buzzed with the message: "Your DNA results are ready. Please collect in person." Rachel's heart clenched. She grabbed her bag and left the building without a word, driving straight to the lab, her nerves a storm inside her chest. Her hands gripped the wheel tightly, fingernails leaving deep marks in her palms. She didn't know what she hoped for, but deep down, she knew. She had always known. Dana was waiting in the reception area, her expression more solemn and empathetic than usual. As she handed Rachel the sealed envelope, she said gently, "Would you like to open it here? I can sit with you." Rachel shook her head. "I need to be alone." She walked to her car and sat in the quiet parking lot behind the building. Rain tapped against the windshield. The envelope in her hand felt both light and impossibly heavy. Slowly, she tore open the seal and unfolded the paper. At the bottom, bold and undeniable, a biological mother-daughter relationship exists between Rachel Bennett and Ava Reed. The world fell completely still. Rachel sat frozen. 1 second, 2. Then tears flooded her eyes, overflowing like a dam, finally breaking after 18 years. She covered her face, her shoulders shaking. Every doubt, every fear, every ache she'd buried, washed away by 2 simple words: my daughter. Ava was her biological child. No more guessing, no more hoping. That night, Rachel sat alone in the living room, the DNA results laid out on the table. She called Eric to come home. He arrived, his usual polished look intact, but weariness flickered in his eyes as he saw her sitting there, gaze heavy. "Is something wrong, Rachel?" She didn't hesitate. There was no room left for lies. "What did you do 18 years ago?" Eric froze. "I ran a DNA test on Ethan. He's not my son, but he is yours." Eric's face drained of color. "I also ran a test between me and Ava. She's my daughter." Eric collapsed into a chair, speechless. After a long pause, he nodded. "When you had the accident, I panicked. Claire gave birth early too. She threatened to disappear with the baby unless I chose. I made a choice. A choice." Rachel's voice cracked like glass. "You stole my daughter. You put her in a foster home to keep the child of you and your mistress." Eric couldn't respond. Rachel stood, holding the DNA report up like a blade. "Her name is Ava, and she saved my life recently. She's been living like an abandoned child, never knowing her mother. And I lived in a lie for almost 20 years. Eric's eyes welled with tears. "I can't undo the past, but I'm sorry. Truly sorry." "It's too late," Rachel said, her voice ice. "I'm going to tell both of them the truth. I owe Ava that. I owe it to myself." The next day, Rachel returned to Warm and Willow. Ava was behind the counter, as bright as ever. But when she saw Rachel walk in with that heavy look in her eyes, she paused. "Are you okay? You look different." Rachel gave a tight smile, then said softly, "Ava, could you spare a few minutes after your shift today? There's something very important I need to tell you." Ava looked puzzled. Sure." That evening, in a quiet little bistro bathed in candlelight and soft jazz, Rachel looked across the table, no longer at a waitress, no longer at a stranger, but at her daughter. She opened her purse, pulled out the lab result, and placed it on the table. Her hands trembled. "Ava, I don't know where to begin, but you're my biological daughter." Ava froze. She looked at the paper, then at Rachel. Her eyes began to redden, her lips trembling. "What are you saying?" Rachel took a deep breath. 18 years ago, I gave birth to a baby girl. But when I woke up, the doctor told me it was a boy. I didn't know. I never imagined my baby had been switched, not until I met you." Ava shook her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. "That can't be. I grew up in foster care. I asked questions, but I never imagined." Rachel reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know I never stopped looking for you." Silence filled the room. Then Ava cried. not the tears of a forgotten child, but of a daughter who had finally found her mother. That evening, as the sunset bathed Elliott Bay in shades of crimson, Rachel sat silently by the window, the DNA results still on the table like a verdict, one that both freed and shattered her. She knew it was time to face the truth, but some truths couldn't be shared with everyone, especially the man who helped cause it all. Her phone buzzed. It was Eric. Rachel hesitated for a moment before answering. "Can I see Ava?" Eric's voice was low, almost pleading. Rachel closed her eyes, fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "No, Rachel, I need to talk to her. I need to see her once. She's my daughter, too." "She's my daughter." Rachel cut him off coldly. "You chose your son with your mistress over her. You had nearly 20 years with Ethan. Don't ask for more." Silence on the other end. Only his heavy breathing. Rachel ended the call. Her heart ached, but she knew she couldn't let Ava face Eric now. Not when her wounds were still fresh. Not when the truth still dangled like a blade above everything. That evening, as Rachel was making tea, Ethan walked into the kitchen. His demeanor was different, less distant, more hesitant, as if he were hiding something. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart. I know you're busy, but I'd like to bring someone over this Sunday. I think it's time you met her. Could you maybe make a nice dinner?" Rachel blinked. "Someone?" Ethan nodded. There was a flicker of nervousness in his eyes, but also a quiet sincerity. "I know it's sudden, but she means a lot to me. I really want you to meet her." Rachel felt a cold fist close around her chest. Her? A wave of unease surged up like a storm. "All right, I'll prepare something nice," she replied slowly, masking the turmoil inside. Ethan gave a small smile and went upstairs. His door closed behind him. Rachel stood still, her hand still clutching the untouched tea bag. Could it be Ava? The thought hit her like lightning. She remembered Ava once speaking softly on a rainy afternoon, her voice trembling, her eyes glowing. "I've been seeing someone lately. He studies music. He's quiet but thoughtful. I've never felt so heard before." Rachel had smiled then, not thinking twice. But now, every sign, every subtle moment between them, was forming a picture she could no longer ignore. Sunday arrived with an unsettling stillness. Seattle skies were neither rainy nor sunny, just an endless stretch of gray. Rachel woke up early. She chose a simple light blue dress and began preparing dinner. Herb-roasted chicken, creamy butternut squash soup, a bottle of white wine, and an apple pie she made herself. The house was filled with the warmth of home-cooked food, but inside Rachel, a silent storm raged. At exactly 11:30 a.m., the doorbell rang. She walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. Standing there were Ethan and Ava. They were holding hands. Ava's eyes widened for a moment when she saw Rachel. Ethan smiled. "Mom, I want you to meet Ava, the girl I love." Rachel smiled, a smile hiding tears within, and invited them in. The meal passed in quiet tension. Ethan excitedly talked about his music project and upcoming performance, while Ava softly shared stories from school. They laughed, they chatted, completely unaware that the woman across from them was carrying a truth that could destroy their world. Rachel looked at Ava. Every gesture, every glance, every smile was her own flesh and blood. Then she looked at Ethan, not born from her, but raised with every ounce of her love. She couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. When dessert was served, Rachel spoke softly. "Ava, Ethan, there's something very important I need to tell you." Both turned to her, curious. "Recently, I had a DNA test done, and it revealed a truth." Ava frowned. Ethan paused, fork in midair. "Ethan, you're not my biological son." The room fell into complete silence. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, what are you saying?" Rachel turned to Ava, her eyes brimming. "And Ava, you are my biological daughter. You were switched at birth. I found you, but I didn't know that the two of you had met." Ava's mouth opened in shock. Her eyes widened, her voice trembling. No, that can't be." Ethan stood up abruptly. "Wait, are you saying that Ava and I were siblings?" Rachel nodded, her hands trembling in her lap. "Half-siblings." Ethan, You're Eric's son with another woman. Ava is my daughter." The truth detonated like a bomb across the table. Ava broke down crying. Ethan staggered back, pale as paper. He didn't look at anyone. He just shook his head over and over. Why now?" Rachel tried to keep her voice calm. "Because I couldn't let you love each other in ignorance. I'm so sorry. I never imagined it would be this cruel." Ethan turned and ran upstairs. Ava sat in stunned silence, her face buried in her hands. That entire evening, the house was steeped in painful quiet. Rachel didn't speak. She didn't force anything. She simply sat outside their rooms, waiting like a mother does, hoping her children would return when they were ready. 1 week later, Ava came back. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was pale, but her gaze was steady. She walked in and hugged Rachel tightly. "Mom, I don't blame you. I just need time. But I know now. I have a family." Rachel held her, tears soaking into Ava's shoulder. The next day, Ethan left Rachel a letter. "Mom, I don't know how to face this. I loved Ava with everything in me. But now, I can't continue. I need to go away for a while to find myself again. But Mom, even if I'm not your biological son, you'll always be the only one I call Mom." Ethan. Rachel read the note in silence. Part of her broke, but part of her began to heal. Months later, Rachel founded a scholarship fund called Ava's Hope to support students who grew up in foster care. Ava moved in with her. She slowly got used to calling Rachel Mom. They cooked together, read together, shared stories of the years they had lost. And every evening, Rachel still set one extra place at the table for the boy she had raised with a love deeper than blood. The past could not be erased, but love, if strong enough, could rebuild from the wreckage and help us walk forward with hope. Rachel had found her daughter again, and more than anything, she had found herself, the mother she had always been, deep within her soul.